members morning once again. For I think this is the fifth, but of course it's the last. I don't exactly know the counting, but whatever it is the last. I think for this session that we've had. As far as the lockdown is concerned, I hope you are still okay. I'm trying to survive, keeping yourselves safe, mask and everything. Um, However, I hope now everyone can see the notes. We have just re-uploaded them. Some of you are complaining the other time that you could not get to download the notes. We have re-uploaded, and I think we can go very fast to where we have. This is of course the last of whatever we have been discussing throughout. It is the last, but where you have the AngloZul War of 1879. Today, I have. The intention of looking at the AngloZul War, 1879, and then I think we shall try to be very fast so that we finish up this task, and then we shall also look at the Bambasa rebellion, Bambasa rebellion, and this was of 1906. That will mark the end of our discussion that we've had, which concerns the nation building in South Africa and the Mofekane. But probably it is majorly a concern of the Zulu kingdom, because you can't begin talking about the South African history unless when you are talking about the Zulu and the Zulu people. Because currently, and on many occasions, South Africa has always continued to shape events, African events. And when we talk, as we talk right now, they are having riots, they are having unrest in South Africa, especially in Johannesburg, and maybe some other towns that are so much accommodating Africans. They are having riots basically because of the imprisonment. But of course, that one also has. It's not just that they have just woken up the other day and began rioting. Of course, it has been embedded in their history as a people, and as we shall come to look at that when we come to look at apartheid. Okay, but of course, that's what is happening today in South Africa. But putting that aside, we are going to talk about the AngloZulu War. As I told you the other time, that we discussed the Zulu state after Shaka. If I can make a recap, we talked about basically three individuals. These were the kings that came after Shaka. Two of them were his brothers. We talk about Dingane, who had participated, of course, in killing him in 1828. Of course, they had their reasons, basically that they were tired of the brutality, Shaka's brutality. And then they killed him, of course, with the help of the formidable Induna, Shaka's Induna. They killed him. Dingane became the king. And of course, also Dingane was killed by the Boers. He was killed by the Boers because he did not play along their demands and their wants. Actually, he was deposed, not even killed. He was deposed. Okay. Of course, those who killed him were the Swazi people, but the Boers deposed him out of power. Okay, because he refused to give them land after promising them land, and of course he killed one of their leaders. That is Pietro Chef. So they revenged, deposed him, and then he ran among the Swazi. And of course, the Swazi had not forgotten all they had done to them, so they murdered him. Now it brought in Mpande. Okay, when they deposed the Ngane, the Boers installed, or they enthroned Mpande as the king of the Zulu. And remember, Mpande was also a brother to Dingane, and therefore was also a brother to Shaka. And all of those were sons of Senzanga Kona. So Mpande came to power, but of course he was a puppet, as I told you the other time. And remember, I told you puppets simply lead. They lead their subjects according to the demands and the tunes of those who have put them in power. He was a puppet. Became a puppet of the Boers. Okay. After 32 years in power, then he died natural death. He wasn't killed. He died natural death. And therefore, his son, Setewayo, in 1873 was enthroned as the full Zulu king. Okay, we talked about the history of Setewayo versus his elder brother Mbulazi and what have you. Even when their father was still alive, this one killed the brother, and then he was confirmed as the crown prince. And when Mpande died, Setewayo became the reigning king in 1873. And now I'm trying to get us to the battle, the AngloZul War of 1879. So he comes into power 1873, and then what he did, he tried, of course, he built a Zulu army to a tune of almost 30,000 active soldiers. Not these ones that were maybe veterans, not these ones who were like, in the case of any war we can mobilize. No, 30,000 active. These were free and permanently employed as soldiers, ready to serve and defend the Zulu state. That's how formidable he was. And then he revived what we call the regimental system to a tune as how it was in the times of his uncle Shaka, not as how it was in the times of Dengane, neither how it was in the times of his own father Mpande. But he revived the regimental system to a tune, to a kind of arrangement that he had studied about, maybe how he had been told about how it was in the times of his uncle, and now building an army and then reviving the regimental system. Okay, now this became King. You can call them King thorns, or you can call them, they became challenges and problems. Challenges and problems to the British. It would have been to his favor in terms of survival as the Zulu king, as long as he had not revived it. Now, when he began building an army, when he began building a formidable army, and then reviving the regimental system, the British at the Cape woke up and realized that unless they check on the advancement of Setewayo, one day he's going to become a real problem to them, and then finally he's going to drive them out of South Africa. So because of this, much as he had some kind of diplomatic contact, some kind of working collegial relationship with the British at the Cape, but because of his activities within his kingdom, okay, they became challenges and problems. So, as a way of trying to control his activities, like making a very strong army, like reviving the regimental system, like making the youths really very much vigorous. So they had to check on his advancement, and they used the diplomacy, they used the interference, until when a time when whatever they had really had to fail. So they had to attack the Zulu. In particular, they had to attack Setewayo such that they can stop him from building a very strong army that would one day challenge the objectives of the British. And what were the objectives of the British? Of course, their objectives were none other than colonization of South Africa. Those were their objectives. Colonization of South Africa. Because remember, I told last time that Setewayo was very unlucky. Maybe if he had come at the time of Dingane, maybe he would have been able to realize his objectives, making the Zulu formidable again, building a very strong army and what have you. But he came at a time when colonialism had taken precedence, when the British now had woken up from the Cape and the Boers, when they had woken up and indeed they wanted to have as large chunks of land as possible and more importantly, to colonize the whole of South Africa. If you can remember, there was one of their own who was called Cecil Rhodes. We shall come to look at him. Cecil Rhodes, he was very much ambitious and very greedy to the extent that he made a statement that he wanted to paint the whole map of Africa red. In other words, he wanted to control painting the whole map of Africa red. He meant that he wanted to control the whole of Africa for the British. That was his dream, and of course he felt like he would do that because he had got a lot of money from the minerals. We shall come to look at the mineral revolution. After this topic, we shall look at the mineral revolution. He had got a lot of money from the mineral revolution and his company called the De Beers Company. We shall come to look at it. So those are the things in which Sequoia became the king of the Zulu, and therefore, when you begin making a very strong army, when you begin reviving the regimental system, of course, these are challenges, they are obstacles to the objectives of colonization of what? Of Africa. So it wasn't late, it wasn't after so long, because when you look at 1873 and 1879, I think those are just 6 years. That hardly had he even gained 10 years in power, then he got clashes with the British. So that's how we are going to look at that. That is the preamble that takes us to look at really the AngloZul War of 1879. But now, of course, we always tell you that as long as you're going to look at any episode in terms of clashes, in terms of resistances, in terms of what is important, first of all, you have to know who are the party players in whatever you are looking at. If you talk about Majimaji Rebellion, who were the party players in Majimaji Rebellion? Who was versing who? Where did it take place? And of course, it is very important to also note the time of when the episode happened. Now, of course, the AngloZulu, well, we had just one AngloZulu, one form of a clash in South Africa in terms of AngloZulu War. They were in 2 episodes, but of course, same year, and the same party players. So when we are categorizing it, we say AngloZulu War, but of course we are going to look at it in the episodes. Now, 1879, and who were the party players? The party players were the British on one side. That is very important. The British on one side, and they were led by this man called Battle Freire. And then the Zulu, of course, Anglo means the British, of course. For those who didn't know it, talk about Anglo, don't get your mind very much stuck and in a state of confusion. Anything Anglo, it is simply the British. Then, of course, the Zulu, it was between the British, led by Sir Battle Freire, and then the Zulu, led by their king, Setewayo. By then, Setewayo, son of Mpande. Of course, then another important point to note is the year it took place, 1879. It is very much important. And the war we are looking at today had 2 episodes. First of all, it was the episode of Isangrana. It is some kind of challenging spelling here, but of course, when you look at it right up, we have uploaded. You can see the spelling. The first war, this was a place, it's not a person. Some of you get to confuse these, some of these facts. You mix them up, and then you maybe feel like Sandwana was a person. No, it was a place where the first war took place, and the first win. Maybe this was a home and away, if you can put it into this kind of when we are watching football, especially the Premier League. I mean, other leagues, you always have 2. You have one at home and then a match away. So the first match, I don't know whether it was home or it was away, but of course they had 2 matches. Isandlana was the first one, and who was the winner? The winner of the first match was the Zulu. Isandlana was won by the Zulu. Now, this made the British very mad because there was no way they could think of any African society defeating them. So, when they went back to the Cape, and they just didn't keep quiet, they didn't nurse the defeat. of course, they made a comeback in the second match. And the second match happened at a place called the Burundi. So the Zulu took the first match, and then the second match, the British won. But at a place called Burundi. So, but all of this they took place in the same year. Therefore, we happen to categorize them as AngloZul War. But of course, there were different battlefields, or there were different battles. But the war was simply the same because the key players remained the same. The first one, it was still the British against the Setewayo, and then even the second one, it was still the British against the Setewayo. Okay, so those are the most important aspects to note if you're going to do anything about the AngloZulu War. Basically, it was between those were the party players, and it was in those two episodes. Of course, 1879. Now we'll go to the causes. Some of the causes I have talked about them. I have talked about, first of all, two of them. Number one, the revival of the army. Of course, it threatened the British. And when they felt threatened, of course, they had to check on the advances in terms of reviving the Zulu army. Of course, it was going to be a threat to their objectives of colonizing the whole of South Africa. And then I said also Setewayo tried to revive what we call the regimental system. Of course, the regimental system did, for Shaka, it helped him achieve a lot of stuff, especially in building what we call a formidable Zulu kingdom. Now, some of these were the causes. If you can look at your write-up that I have sent you, I'm going to go through them very fast because I have given what is very much important, the background of the AngloZulu War, 1879. So the causes, I'm going to go through them very fast. Now he says, this was a war, of course, I have talked about that. Then in this war, the Zulu were led by Setewayo, I have also explained that. Setewayo's need to revive the Zulu military glory was the first one, okay? And because he wanted to revive the military glory, that's why he had to build an army to a tune of 30,000. I don't know how many soldiers that are making the composition of Museveni's UPDF. But of course, I know because today at their times, we are living in advanced times. I think he has hundreds and hundreds, not to make mention of those who are retired, but they're still active. In case anything happens, they can simply call you and you participate. So I think he has many, because he has the Navy, he has the Marine, he has the Land Forces. But now, in those times, to have an army to a tune of 30,000, it was simply a threat, especially to those who had their ambitions, like the British, to colonize the whole of South Africa. Now, that need that Setewayo was nursing led to what we call the AngloZulu War, because here says the glory had been undermined by Impande's peaceful policy. That was his father. This brought him in conflict with the British, of course, because the British wanted it to be like that. Maintain some kind of peace in your kingdom. Don't make people really begin thinking about the glory, the might of their kingdom as how it was. You just maintain peace, leave them eat, produce, and do whatever they want, and then you move on. Of course, that's what they wanted. And when they shall come to look at the apartheid policy. When they got apartheid policy, they created what we call the Bantustans. And in the Bantustans, that's what exactly they did. They made the Africans very inactive, gave them poor education, gave them poor kind of health care systems, made them think that they were losers in life, and then that's how they destroyed generations and generations of Africans in South Africa for over 80 years. And that's why today, those rights you are seeing in South Africa, they are not because of the fact that Zuma was imprisoned. Because Zuma, even when he was president, he didn't even fight for the rights of the Africans. He simply ate his money, worked with the Gupta brothers. Those were the Indian brothers who had very much money in South Africa, and had worked with them and then stole state money. He didn't do anything about for the Africans. Okay. Therefore, they don't even have any reason. But because the population among the Africans, that's how it was engineered by the Europeans, the Boers and the British. In the times of apartheid, the population is still very much vulnerable. They are not educated, they don't have money, they don't have land. Because today, when we talk about South Africa, 87% of land to the whites, okay, and 13% of land to the Africans. And of course, to be part of this 13%, you have to be maybe from the family of Ramaphosa, the family of those guys who participated in fighting against apartheid, like the Zuma. Okay, to be part just to get this to get something out of the 13%. Okay, so the right you are seeing is that the Africans have been for so many years they have been downtrodden and they have been really made very inactive in terms of emancipation. Okay, that's why we are having rights in South Africa. They always wait for a moment when there is something and then their anger is exposed. Now, back to what we are discussing here. I said to revive the Zulu glory, of course, this made the British uncomfortable, and therefore they had to attack Setewayo. And in defense, we happen to have what we call the AngloZul War. Need to protect the Zulu independence by Setewayo, of course, at all costs. Setewayo had just one objective. Actually, if chances were there, he would even try to expand further the Zulu kingdom. But because now things had so much changed, you had the Boers, you had the British, you had even some other societies now becoming very much strong. Now the problem was to maintain the independence, which was being threatened by the British, and so because of his desire to maintain the independence, at the end of the day, he clashed with the British, and that's how we happen to have the Anglo-Zulu War 1879. They tried to regain the Zulu land by Setewayo. For example, you remember that land I told you, which was given to the Boers near Blood River by Impande, because the land didn't give them land, even after recovering cattle from Sekonera. He didn't give them land as promised. But when Dingani was when Impande was put into power by the Boers, of course he had to give, because remember I told you it was a puppet. He gave them whatever they wanted such that they can live him in peace. Now his son wasn't happy, and when he got power, he wanted to get the land back. Now, of course, all of this brought him into trouble, into clashes, and thus the 1879. The rumors that the Zulus had killed white missionaries also led to the war. Remember that as Impande was getting enthroned, of course, by the British secretary, colonial secretary, he's the one who crowned him. The condition was that you allow missionaries to carry on their missionary work within the Zulu land. Now, rumor began spreading that Impande had killed one of them. So Battle Freire had to attack the Zulu, and thus the 1879 Anglo-Zulu War. Disrespect of the African cultures by the whites, for example, missionaries, you know that one cuts across all the resistance you can ever talk about. One of the causes of most of the clashes between Africans and the whites, disrespect of the African cultures, forced labor. There are those that are cutting across. So it is one of those that is also here. Forced labor, which is also there. The stories of anti-European war, songs in Zululand, they never liked them. So the missionaries advised the British to attack before the Zulu attack. Because remember, I told you, the Ngani had begun reviving everything that was regimental, and among which they had a number of songs and slogans. So the slogans began taking precedence amongst the Zulu, and to the advice of the missionaries, Fred decided to attack. And so on, famine, overtaxation, then the refusal of Setewayo to disband the Zulu army, okay, it had become a threat, and the conditions they gave him, you disband. To disband is to dissolve, okay. If you had made if you come to Uganda here, there are a number of you can call them rebel groups in Uganda that have been disbanded by President Museveni. Rebel groups, one of which was Moses Ali's group of West Nile. I've forgotten the name of his group, Moses Ali. Today he's working in the government, and I think he's the first deputy premier or the third, whatever it is, but he's something like that. I think that was the kind of understanding they reached. So disband, it meant that Moses Ali to be accepted in government, he had to disband. To disband or to dissolve. To dissolve. Even the ADF, okay, Somewhere, somehow, some of the ADF soldiers were disbanded, were dissolved in the names of, you remember, Major Chigun and what have you. So you reach an understanding. Now the British are demanding Setewayo to dissolve the 30,000 because I told you the 30,000 was, these were many soldiers. Of course, in the case they are equipped with weapons, they can cause damage to the British, even to the extent of chasing them away from South Africa. So there were many, and they were worried that in case these guys here can get, if they can access modern weapons, they can do a lot of damage. So they commanded him, you dissolve the army. You dissolve the army, but he refused. Of course, when he refused, they attacked him. And so on and so forth. Now we go to the effects. He said, I'm going to be very fast. And I hope I have uploaded the write-up. You have it there. So it is not a very difficult concept. AngloZul War, it is something that is very much doable. So if you find that kind of question somewhere, please you go ahead and handle it. Major key players, you talk about Setewayo. The third king. After Shaka. Okay. After Shaka, of course, now we can call him the fourth king. Because when you count Shaka, Dingane, then Mpande, then the fourth is Setewayo. So it was between the British and the Zulu, which led by Battle Frere, and then the Boers, the Zulu led by their king called Setewayo, who was the son of Mpande. And of course, it was in 2 episodes. The first was at Isangrana, whereby the Zulu emerged the winners. They ambushed, of course, they used the military tactic of ambushing. You know, when you are fighting, you have a number of tactics. You employ a number of tactics in terms of fighting. Others, they use guerrilla, like our own here, use the guerrilla warfare, and defeated Obote regime. You can use surprise attack, which was being used by the Nazis. I don't know if you have heard of the Nazis. Nazis, that is Hitler. And when he was asked about how he managed to be very much effective in defeating enemy forces at different battlefields, for him, he said he was always using a surprise attack. And not surprise attack at any time. Okay? He always attacked at a time when the soldiers felt sleepy. Just imagine being attacked at like 4 p.m. No, 4 a.m. in the morning. From 3 to 4 a.m. That's where he always attacked his enemies. Between 4 a.m. to 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. When the sleep is really catching up with you, seriously, you are dozing and then the guy is very much sober. So that's how he managed to defeat his enemies. Surprise attack. And he could, by the time it was 5 a.m., he had caused a lot of damage. That's why he was very strong. I don't know. You will take time to look at those who are going to pursue history. You talk about Hitler. That's why he was able to fight two fronts. Okay, I'm sorry to take you into this, but sometimes the few facts are very, very much important. He fought 2 fronts, that is the Western Front and then the Eastern Front. In the Eastern Front, we had Russia. Okay, he was fighting 2 camps, and then the Western Front, we had the British. Again, the British, how much as between them and South Africa, they also featured in the Second World War. Again, the British and the Americans. Okay, and here he was Hitler of Germany when he's fighting with 2 powerful camps. No wonder he was defeated. But the fact that he was able to fight them for like 5 to 6 years, that's why we say that he was a very strong man. But one of his tactics was surprise attack very, very early in the morning. And remember, those countries, they are winter countries, okay? A lot of snow and a lot of coldness. Now, he had trained his soldiers at the time when the others are feeling very cold. For you must not feel cold. You have to be very much sober and very much awake. Pick your guns, go and fight the enemy. Okay. Now, it was the same tactic that Setewayo used in the first match at Isangrana. Surprise attack. Attacked the British unaware, beat them terribly, and defeat, and they ran away. don't think they stayed around. Some were seriously wounded, others killed, others were even crying for their lives to be forgiven, while others who were very lucky, they ran away. And of course, they became very, very annoyed. So they had to make a countermeasure and then attacked and defeated Setwaya to Burundi. Of course, when he was attacked, he was defeated, and then these were the effects. Okay, we're not going to look at reasons why he was defeated. Of course, maybe you can try to look around and get to see why the Africans were defeated in the AngloZul War. But of course, as long as we have covered the background, as long as we have covered the causes, we have covered the effects, the rest you can handle. One, the Zulu were defeated in the war. Although the Zulu managed to register victory in the initial battle of Isandrana that we have discussed, they were finally crushed. Of course, you cannot wonder. Of course, the British were mighty, and we can also applaud the Zulu. Yeah? You just imagine you are having an army of people who are equipped with spears, and even some were just equipped with insults and abuses. Muri basiru, mwatwa batamwa, and even some were having stones. Okay, those were the weapons these people were having, and of course the which were having cannons. And those who were supporting Arsenal, these guys had cannons. You know that Tigani that is on the Arsenal badge. Those who are supporting Arsenal, you can look at that badge. The badge has a very funny gun. It was very important in those days. So they had a cannon. That's what we call a cannon. That gun on Arsenal's badge. So they had those guns sophisticated, and therefore, mighty as they were, they had to crush the Zulu. Two, the Zulu military glory came to an end. Of course, as how it had been built by a founding father, that is Shaka Zulu, it was ended. And we can't say that Setewaya was weak. He tried. To me, he was better than his uncle, Bingani, and even his father, Mpande. Far much better. Okay? But of course, it was taken away. The Zulu state lost her independence. Many people lost their lives, most especially the side of the Africans. I've talked to you of what these guys here used. And they lost. The Zulu lost their land to the whites and were pushed in reserves. And after that, we happen to have what we call the apartheid law. The apartheid law putting the Zulus in what we call Bantustans. So many effects really happened after the defeat of the Zulu, 1879. The Zulu lost their land. They were led to the population in Zulu, as many people were killed, the displacement of people. Of course, they were displaced as they were running away from the adverse effects of the war. Much property was destroyed, including plantations. You can read through the write-up that we have uploaded, and then much of this stuff is going to make sense. Dini Zulu was made king. Okay, the rule of Setewaya was brought to an end. Dini Zulu was made a king in the place of Setewaya, but as a mere puppet of the whites. Okay, I hope now we have a comfortable understanding of what the puppet is. Who a puppet is. Dini Zulu was made the king. Now, this was the king of the British, the puppet of the British. And Mpande was the puppet of the Boers. It laid foundation for other rebellions such as the Bambatha Rebellion of 1906. But when we are looking at the careers and achievements of Setewaya, we said Setewaya was captured and then he was taken to the Cape, and then from the Cape he was. The good thing was with the British, they never killed chiefs in Africa. They never murdered the chiefs in Africa. You take an example of our own history here. When they captured the Mwanga, Kabaka Mwanga, and then Kabalega from the areas of northern Uganda, they didn't kill them. They exiled them to the Seychelles Islands, and then when they captured, even when Kabaka Mutesa II refused to agree with some of the issues that were embedded in 1900 agreement, he wasn't killed. He was simply exiled to Britain and then later brought back to amongst his. So the British never killed, unlike the Germans. You know what the Germans did in Tanganyika? They captured Chief Mukwawa. Actually, they didn't capture him. Chief Mukwawa committed suicide, and when they found out his body, they beheaded the body and took the skull of Chief Mukwawa into their museum in Munich. Until recently, that's when it was returned to the not now Tanganyika, to Tanzania. Just recent, I think there are some 5 or 6 years back, when the Tanganyikans claimed the skull of their great king, and then that's when the skull of Chief Mokwa was returned. But they were very brutal. But the British never really killed they never killed the chiefs of Africans. To the best, they simply exiled them, and then when they were exiled, get another from the royal blood and make him the king of his own people. Now, that gets us to none other than what we call the Bambatha Rebellion. We are done with the 1879. Now we come to the Bambatha Rebellion, and this is going to be the last of our discussion as far as the Zulu kingdom is concerned. And after this, we go to what we call the defensive states. But Mr. Siraj told me that you guys have not everything about defensive states. And if so, I think, I don't know, I will discuss with him, and then I get to know what his take is. That either you copy them or we discuss. That is the next concerning defensive states, or we discuss them. And then after that, we shall go and look at the missionaries. Then the missionaries, we shall look at apartheid policy in South Africa. Of course, those people, we are not going to repeat this stuff. If you haven't been attending our lessons, for us, we are done with this theme. Nation building and Mufekane, we are done. We are not repeating anything. When you come back, you will sort out yourselves. I don't know. Maybe you will pay and go and access the lessons again. But of course, we shall not repeat. Now, we discussed the last one. That is the Bambatha Rebellion 1906. We're going to say the effect. One of the effects of the defeat of the Zulu was that it gave rise. Of course, the Zulu were not the kind of people you would say that now we have conquered and then everything is okay. No way. They always remembered the glory of their kingdom. Now, this led to what we call Bambatha. You're surprised. Bambatha is not a place. Bambatha is just is a person. Of course, there is an M here, a rebellion. And this one was in 1906. And you're surprised, Bambatha wasn't even a king of the Zulu. He wasn't. He was a simple Induna, a minor chief or a minor Induna of a certain clan, but among the Zulu, the Zulu kingdom. And then when he talked to his people, they believed in him, and they escorted him in a war against the mighty British. Okay, we have always 2 issues here as regards the Bambatha Rebellion. 1, causes of the rebellion, and then 2, effects of we have the cause of the rebellion and then effects of the rebellion. Now, we're going to go through them very fast. And today we have to wind up with all of this. Even when I will not be done with some of them, I think you people will get, you have seen the notes, you try to look into them and then make sense out of them. This was a war between the British and the Zulu. Of course, 1906. The years are very much important. Don't plan with them. You simply make some kind of, you customize your facts. There are those who feel, because some people say even history is very hard because you have to cram. No. Simply customize facts, try to understand them, and don't cram. Because I told you that you're not supposed even to write the exact words as how they appear in your notes. Read the cause, read the point, understand it, and write it in any way with using your own kind of English. Of course, it doesn't have to be very poor English. Of course, simple but good English. That English of which is fake, please don't use it. You don't get marks out for after using it. So, between Bambatha, I told you he was a person. There are 2 things Whenever you get a heading of any topic, pick out the leading key terms. Try to understand them. Actually, when you understand them, the rest becomes, even when it is chemistry, even when it is, whenever you get a heading, pick out the key term and understand it. Of course, the rest is going to become somehow handy. And with the hand, I mean it's going to become easy. Now, the moment you understand that Bambatha was none other than a minor Indian chief, who was in the leadership of a certain Zulu clan. He wasn't the king of the Zulu, it was just a minor Indian chief, and therefore Bambatha was a person. It wasn't a place, he was a person. And what he did, he led the Zulu into a war, into a resistance against the British. And when was that? It was in 1906. Now the rest becomes very easy. It was a war, of course, I told you, understand the key players, the British and the Zulu. And of course, the leader of the Zulu was called Bambatha. And the rebellion itself was named the Bambatha Rebellion because of the leader of the rebellion. And then he said he was led by former Zulu chief of the Zondi clan. Okay? Of course, the chiefs are none other than the Indunas. Okay? He was just a former Induna, maybe, I don't know. He had seen the times when the Zulu was glorious. He had seen the times when everything was okay among the Zulu people. And then now, he had also come to live in the times when the Zulu people were now serving on their knees before foreigners, because the British and the Boers were not indigenous occupants of South Africa. They were foreigners. And now, how can you begin kneeling? How can you begin serving on your knees before a foreigner? So, to such kind of people who had seen times, it became very much an aching kind of feeling, and therefore, he took it upon himself that I have somewhere, somehow, I have to mobilize my people, then try to point them into direction of trying to revive the glory of the Zulu kingdom. And that's what happened. I have what we call the Bambatha Rebellion. Of course, loss of land. The causes are almost the same causes as how as when you look at the number of resistances in Africa, the causes they are the same. The causes are the same. But what is important, where was the resistance? Okay. The resistance, now this time around, the resistance is in South Africa. We shall also come to look at other resistances, like the Namahero resistance. When we start about Southwest Africa, that is Namibia, there is another last resistance that we shall come to look at, Namahero resistance. Of course, when you talk about Namahero, don't mix it up with the Bambatha. Simply just have to customize your facts. So just know where the resistance was happening in Africa, then you get to know the time of the resistance, and then get to know the party players. Of course, the causes, they are simply the same, unless a few which are synonymous with the respective kind of resistance. For example, talk about the Maji resistance in southern Tanganyika. They are the leading cause or causes, but the leading cause was none other than German brutality, first of all, and then forced labor on German plantations. Now we get to know that these were the leading causes for the Maji rebellion. When you come to look at Mau Mau rebellion in Kenya, 1956, what were the causes? The causes, of course, the leading causes, loss of land among others, but the leading cause, you talk about Mau Mau rebellion, you talk about the misrepresentation of the Africans in the Legico. Okay? You're going to talk about 1956. The resistance of 1956, it was a later resistance. That was Mau Mau. But now this was the time when colonization had taken place, when the British were now very much comfortable in Kenya. But one of the inconsistencies of the British that they did in Kenya was that they gave Africans one slot If you remember what Legico is, that is the Legislative Council. Today we call it the Parliament. Okay? This was the Parliament in Kenya, or the Legico of Kenya, but the Africans were given one representative. And of course, he wasn't black in skin. He was still white in skin and appearance, but he was called a missionary. That was typical nonsense. Okay? So for those who were really who had actually served in the Second World War and had known how oppressive these guys were, they said, you can't give us one in the Legico, and he's not even black in skin. He's still white. But then you feel like the missionaries get to understand the feelings of the Africans because maybe. So now this was the leading cause of the Mau Mau rebellion in Kenya. So you simply pick out the leading causes, but the rest of the causes are very much similar. Now we come to the Bambasa, loss of land. For example, 1904, a third of land had been grabbed by the whites. A third is a lot of land. In Islam, let me not go to Islam. I was going to teach you something. But of course, if you are making a will in Islam, some of you are there, you are Muslims, you don't know how. If you are making a will and you are Muslim, you simply pick a third. We call it bequeathing. You bequeath a third of your property. Either you give it in charity, or you give it to your relatives, or then the other remainder, you reserve it. You leave it intact, or you reserve it to be given out. Following the procedures of Sharia. Of course. So a third of land, a third is much. Just imagine a third of 100 million. You are people who are doing, okay, a third of, let's say, 10 million. A third of 10 million, how much is that? I'm waiting for some answers here. How much is it? Hey, I think it's 3 million, right? Is it? 10 million, it is 3 what? Hey, if it is 100 million, I thought it would be 30 million. So just imagine if you had land that is maybe 30,000 square miles. Or, 30,000 square miles. 30,000 square miles. When they just pick a third of that, it means that you're going to be left with, I think 20,000 square miles. And then 10,000 square miles is wholesomely taken. That is a lot and a lot of land. So in 1904, okay, the Zulu had lost a third of their land to the whites. It was out of overtaxation, brutal methods of collection, tax collection. All of these points feature in different resistances. Okay, they flogged them in public. What have you? Spirit of nationalism among the Zulu. Of course, they hadn't forgotten their history. They always lived with the feeling that the Zulu were mighty, the Zulu were glorious, and whoever was born, as long as you were a Zulu, you were supposed to serve just one purpose: defend the Zulu kingdom. So that spirit of nationalism led to the rebellion. Then brutal methods. Okay, I talked about them to gain the political independence of the Zulu, which had been lost in 1879. Okay. It had been lost. I remember at the hands of Kuwa Setewayo, as he was trying also to revive it. So they said, no, we should not give up. We should try to follow the dream of Setewayo. Maybe we can recover it. So that one, to regain the political independence, led to the war. The deportation of King Setewayo, I told you of that the eventualities and the fate of Setewayo was that he was deported and taken to Cape Town, then from there taken to England. So the deportation of their king they didn't forget about it. Moreover, the Zulu who came in place, his place was a mere puppet without political power. The British introduction of rent that the poor Africans had to pay in order to use land, and so on. Members, you look at the causes, they are very clear. Imprisonment of Africans and chiefs, particularly anoint the Zulu, for example, Chief Geza of Sere was arrested and imprisoned, and so on and so forth. So the causes, now the imprisonment, those were some of what I call specific reasons for the Bambatha rebellion. But the others are cut crossing points, loss of land. You talk about things like overtaxation. Then overtaxation, we talk about things like brutal methods of tax collection. Among those are some of the usual causes of rebellions in the different areas, in different parts of Africa. The strong and inspirational leadership provided by Bambasa. Strong and inspirational. Of course, if it wasn't inspirational, they wouldn't have joined him, but he gave them hope, he inspired them, and then again they picked their poor weapons, like spears and shields, and marched against the Zulu, I mean the British. Um, then the cause of the rebellion, describe the cause of the rebellion. This is basically it is basically factual, but the cause we simply look at what transpired when these guys were fighting, when the Boers, I mean when the Zulu were fighting against the British. Of course, number one, it was led by Bambatha. Then two, the rebellion began 1906 when the magistrates trying to collect poll tax met angry Africans. Of course, the South Africans have always been angry. You can't just tell them to do stuff and then you begin oppressing them around and then you think you walk out with it. No. So then what transpired 15th February, the Africans who had shot the two policemen were arrested and shot to death by the Natal government. Then five. So it's all about what transpired. In the course, you simply have to sit down, read through, and then get to know what transpired when the resistance was taking place. And then the British immediately sent Colonel Mackenzie. Uh-huh. And then on 10th the June, Bambasa and most of his supporters were killed at the Battle of Momegero, some kind of difficult spelling here. Then Dinizulu was arrested in 1907 on account that he had fully supported the Bambasa rebellion. Because remember, Dinizulu was the king of the Zulu, but he wasn't the one who led the Bambasa rebellion. It was a chief who led the Bambasa rebellion, but Dinizulu did not do anything to stop. Of course, the rioters in the rebellion. Then the effects of the rebellion, as we are winding up, members, effects, the Zulu were defeated by the British on 20th June 1906. Two, the Zulu lost their independence. The Zulu was arrested by the Natal government on the allegation that he had been behind the rebellion. The Zulu offered manual labor in the mines and farms. Now, completely, the Zulu lost their independence and almost lost their identity. Not just the Zulu kingdom is still there in South Africa, but everything that was so mighty about the Zulu kingdom almost ended in 1906 with the defeat of the uh, Bambata chief and the rebellion. And then widespread famine, of course, they were disorganized. Many people lost their lives. For example, more than 3,000 Africans, including Bambasa, lost their lives. The whites lost 30 soldiers. Very unfair. The Africans became poorer while the whites got richer. Property was destroyed, including plants. Many Zulus were displaced during and after the rebellion. The population in the Zulu land was registered as many people were killed. The Zulu learned a lesson that they were militarily inferior to the whites and hence changed the means of resisting with them. Okay, maybe they had not believed it with the AngloZul War 1879, but now they came to terms with the fact that the British were stronger and somehow they were weak. Then, of course, the Zulu military body was given a death blow, and then it was buried in the backyard of historical events. It ended with the Bambasa uprising. The Natal government made reforms in the administration of the Zulu. For example, four whites were appointed to represent the interests of the Africans in the Legislative Council. This is what I've told you that happened with the Mau Mau rebellion. Okay, The Legico, whenever the British were here, they could form what we call the Legico, Legislative Council. But of course, because they did undermine the Africans, they never picked Africans to represent Africans as a group of people. I told you in Kenya, they picked a missionary to represent Africans in the Legico. A missionary who was still a white. The same applied to South Africa here. When they did Bambasa, they still picked four whites. They picked four whites to represent the interests of the Africans. Okay. Of course, a white can never be an African, and I don't think a white can understand. Much as even get to live with the Africans, you can never understand their feelings, you can never understand their sentiments, and of course, it was very much unfair. But that's how they wanted it. Maybe they were also very much racist. The idea of uniting all white states in South Africa was favored by the defeat of the Zulus. It led to the formation of independent churches in Zululand. The Zulu state started respecting whites. Segregation of Africans by the whites increased. Then Zulu nationalism increased with their defeat. Of course, they never forgot their glory. Much as they were defeated, but again, they kept them going on and on. They never ceased. That's why they were able to participate, and they were able to subscribe to later political movements like the Inkatha Freedom Party. Of course, that was a party for the Zulu that was staged to fight against apartheid, and then some of them joined the African National Congress of Nelson Mandela, Robert Sobukwe, among others. Later on, and it was simply because of the fact that their nationalistic sentiments towards their independence and their identity as the Zulu people never died, much as they had been defeated in the AngloZul War and in the Bambasa Rebellion. Now, why were the Zulus defeated? I don't know how much time I'm left with. I've worked with Mr. Tashid Mustafa here, and he's telling me I have 4 minutes. So, in the 4 minutes, I'm going to ask you, of course, the reasons why the, the, the Zulu were defeated by the British. They are there in the write up. The full determination of the British to crush the rebellion, among others. There are so many. You can read through them and understand. Of course, we have got the background and the vast preamble of everything. Then we also have the collapse of the Zulu state. Factors for the collapse of the Zulu state are also here. Death of Shaka. We talk about things like succession disputes in the kingdom, i.e. between Setewayo and Ngulazi. We talked about that. It weakened them, and of course, it divided them. Of course, the supporters of Setewayo and Ngulazi, now that one undermined the unity, and thus they were defeated. Lack of strong leaders like Shaka, the leaders that came later were very weak. For example, Mbande, they were very weak, and they were too much of leaders who were puppets. So the Zulu had to collapse with a kind of leaders. Mufekane weakened the Zulu, and hence its collapse. The Mufekane, the Europeans' intrusion gave the Zulu a final blow. Of course, intrusion means interference in the Zulu affairs. And the interference even led to wars, AngloZul War, and then Bambas, and so on and so forth. So, members, we are done with our very big topic. We have discussed this lockdown in the 42 days, nation building, and the Mufekane. Basically, we have exhaustively discussed about the Zulu kingdom, and with the discussion of how it was collapsed, the factors leading to the collapse of the Zulu kingdom, that brings us to an end of this very, very big topic. You have the notes, download them, and then try to read them. Not from your phones, not from your workstations like laptops, but please download them, print them, and then you read them. Okay, I wish you the best, inshallah, and happy Eid. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.